Guys, this is rough one at 5 o'clock.
That's why the next one's at 5 or at 6.
I literally jumped off a Zoom meeting and hopped right on this.
Oh,
I had a 7.5-hour Zoom meeting today.
7.5 hours?
Yep. I do twice a month. We do what we call PSCs, which are where we staff every case in our district. And it takes me about 7.5 hours to get through about half the cases.
All right, we're live now.
We're live. If you want to make an announcement.
Yeah, for those of you that are watching, I'd like to make a quick announcement. We are waiting on 2 other commissioners to enter into the meeting at this time. So we're just kind of sitting here waiting, and hopefully they'll be logging in quickly. And then as soon as they do, then we'll get right into the meeting with the public hearing about our budget. So give us a few minutes.
Sorry, Mary Jane, I muted everybody while we were waiting. You're going to have to go in and unmute yourself.
Ronnie, do you know where Shelley, anything about Shelley?
She's just texted back to me saying, okay, she's on her way.
Oh, okay.
She thought this was going to be at 6. She's coming.
Good. I haven't heard back from Ron.
All we need is Shelley for a quorum.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, do you have to have a quorum for a public hearing? You
Yes.
do.
I wonder if Ron Gay thought it was at 6.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ron, did you know our meeting's at right now for
I want to stay muted.
Hey, Mayor, we have a quorum present. Unless you want to wait.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so at this time, and I'm sure Ron Gay at this time is trying to get logged in, so he'll be in the meeting also in just a few minutes. So we'll go ahead and start the meeting since we have a quorum. Welcome again. This is our hearing on our budget for the city of Mangum, and at this time, I'd like to turn it over to our city manager, Dave Andren.
All right. So there he is. He's popping in right now. So this is the budget hearing for the fiscal year 2021. I've had to put a lot of work and blood, sweat, and tears into making this document something that we can actually work with for next year. And I wanted you all to know that a lot of what you're going to see is a result of COVID-19. I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm using that as we're going to see a loss in some revenues, and you'll see where that's going to be and how we're going to account for it. So without further ado, we'll just get started. I'm going to kind of blaze through these slides pretty quick because there's a lot of them. I encourage you to stop me, speak up, say, hey, got a question, and we'll go back and we'll talk about it. So the big picture for the budget for 2021 is as its costs. Our total estimated cost, which are expenditures for 2021, are $5,982,000 and some change. This is a 4.85% increase over 2019-2020. And the reason for that is partially due to the airport improvement project, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Resources, we're looking at 6.5 million and some change. Again, this is a 7.07% increase over fiscal year 2019-2020. And you can see where those funds come in. We talk about those numbers and then we subtract out the airport improvement project. That accounts for a very large portion of our budget. We're getting in federal and state grants of $464,000 for next year, and we're going to have to match those funds at $39,000. We've already spent some funds, and we've received some funds from the state and federal governments, and we'll continue to do that throughout the year to get this project finished. But so when you remove the AIP, you're going to see that our expenses are sitting at about 5.5 million. And our revenues are sitting at about 5.5 million. And this is a decrease on both sides. And the really worrying part is the revenue side of a decrease of 8.65% overall for the year. Now that may not sound, as horrible as we've been talking, but when you're talking about 8.65%, you're talking about a $500,000 shortfall. So the way we're going to make up for that is to use some of the fund balance and bring that in as a fund balance application. To meet the state's 10% rule, we need to add this additional $500,000 in resources to meet the projected expenses. We're going to add in 200,000 in the general fund, and we're going to add in 300,000 for the MUA. The use of the fund balance is typically kind of frowned upon, but with COVID-19, it really put us in a bad way, and there's no way that we would be able to survive out of next year without having those funds available to us. And we know we have those funds, and we've been tracking them all year. So we're expecting a 75% loss in sales tax for the first quarter of fiscal year 2020-21. We're also expecting a 25% loss in utility revenues over that time period. And this is just folks that are not going to be able to pay their bill because, you know, they've either been laid off or they've been out of work, or, you know, they've been furloughed or what have you. We know that those folks are out there, and, you know, we've stopped forcing the collection of bills. We're not shutting anybody down, and we're going to work with them once this emergency is over. So that's some funds that we are going to recoup at the end. Once people start getting back to work and the jobs start coming back in, we'll recoup those revenues over a 6 to 8 to 10 month period. So if all goes as planned, using that net fund balance, the net fund balance at the end of the year should be about the same as the end of this year. So plus or minus 50,000. And that's actually pretty good news. We're expecting that even without the inflow of that 500,000, we're still going to be in the positive. And by my estimation, it's not very much. It's somewhere in the vicinity of 70,000. So, and that's not good. And we of course want to do better, and we want to have that 10% rule. So before we get into the individual departments, one of the things that I've focused really hard on for this year is we've set some priorities for 2021 that we need to accomplish. We need to get these things done, and it's in order to sustain our future. And I'm going to go through those kind of really quickly. The first is we desperately need to enter into a long-term agreement with the hospital to rent that CDU back out, to lease that to them. That accounts for about $60K a year, $60,000 for the general fund. And we haven't received that since December of 2018, when Alliance was removed from the hospital. And then we have the Armory. The Armory rents out for approximately $39,500 a year. So when you add those two together, you're looking at about $100,000 in lost revenue to the general fund, and we really need to recoup that. We've got to find a way to recoup that. So getting back into those leases with the hospital, especially for the CDU, that's going to be a big priority for me this year, and we're going to work on that. And I've already started that conversation with the hospital. So the second piece is I know I'm probably gonna get beat up all across the county for this one, but our relationship with 911 and how the whole thing puts together is not sustainable. The city's personnel cost to operate the 911 center is $207,000 this year. That's $207,000 that we're doing in personnel costs, but we don't get reimbursed at all. In fact, the only reimbursements that we receive, we don't get anything from the telecommunications companies. The 911 fees all go to the 911 authority. They use those funds and they don't hoard them, and they are actually using them for what they need to, and that's just to pay for the 911 equipment, which is theirs. So I don't want us thinking that the 911 authority is doing anything wrong. They're not. They're absolutely doing what they should be doing with those funds. So I just want to make sure we understand that. The only thing that we receive in reimbursement for running 911 for the entire county is $4,800 per year that we receive from Granite and Greer County EMS. So of the $207,000 that we're spending on personnel costs, we're getting back 4,800. That's not sustainable. It's not. It just doesn't work. And when we're already struggling with in an economy that doesn't seem to be growing on us, to have to continue to operate this 911 facility without getting the reimbursement that we need to get from the other entities is just it's not something that we can continue to do. So we really need to negotiate with all of our surrounding communities. And by negotiate, I think we need to come to the table with something that is fair and is equitable and is based on their usage of 911 and with a full understanding of what their financial situations are. And we don't want to ask more than what we know they can handle.
Dave, are you talking about Reed and Willow?
Reed, Willow, Granite probably needs to come up a bit. I've calculated it all out. I don't have it on me for this, and I don't want to really go into it for this.
No, that's okay.
But if we were to split out every entity that uses 911 and you look at a 3-year averaging, of course, Mangum is the highest user. We are number one for both fire and the police department. And we should be responsible for approximately 80,000 of that 200,000, if that gives you any kind of indication of what we should be collecting. So that is the relationship with the 911 and how we need to come up with a solution. Oops, wrong way. The third is that the MUA is owed about $317,000 in back unpaid utility debt. These are closed accounts. There's some that are 5-7 years old, and those that are 5 or 7 years old, we need to really seriously consider just writing those off. And those account holders that may have passed away, I don't want to put their families in any kind of major burden by going after them for this, this debt. So once we remove those and we look at what those numbers really are, my goal is to take that number and reduce it by 50% over FY 2021, and then an additional 25% in 2022. And we're going to do that through small claims court. And we're going to have to actively pursue those the court costs and getting reimbursed for all of that. So
Dave,
my fourth, yes.
Have we considered using an outside collection agency for those?
We have been approached on that. And I'm not a big fan of them. And the reason is because a lot of them use some very, very hateful, predatory tactics. I don't think that that's where the signal we want to send, that we're going to sick these guys on you, because a lot of these companies use some tactics that are really sketchy. And I've heard some horror stories of what they do when they contact you.
What about offering like on these past due a 60% discount if you pay in full, and 80% if you break it up into payments instead of in lieu of going to court?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
well, of course,
like
we're going to start with, hey, you guys, you owe us money, and we're going to start with trying to get them to come up with those funds. The odds of that volunteering, that happening, I don't know. But yeah, we're obviously going to go after the non-court solution first, but I have a feeling that we're going to end up in civil court for a lot of it. So Anything else?
No,
Okay.
not for me.
The last priority has been one of my top priorities since I've gotten here to Mangum, and that is we desperately need to get City Hall into a compliant space, an ADA compliant space. We went through some proposals last year, and we went through some wickets to get those proposals working, and the resounding word that we got back from the public is that City Hall really needs to stay downtown, we need to hear that, and we need to understand that, and we need to really consider that when we look at these spaces. The city's been out of compliance with ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, for approximately 30 years, and we were, every entity was really supposed to only have 10 years to get back into compliance. Now they're not coming and beating down our door saying you got to do this, you got to do this. But we also don't have people that are filing against us, and it's only a matter of time before that happens. And we don't just have an obligation for the regulatory aspect of it. It's an ethical thing too. We can't just open our doors for those who can walk up the stairs. We need to open our doors for folks that are in wheelchairs. We need to be able to open our doors and have visitors to City Hall and be able to have access to their public officials when they use a walker, when they are in a wheelchair, when they have disabilities that don't let them come in. And it's a high priority for me. It's a high priority for the workers of the city. And I think we need to figure out a way to do it. And that's one of my priorities for this year. So getting onto the general fund, the total resources for the general fund are estimated at $2.147 million. And you'll see the breakdown of where those resources come from. And intergovernmental covers 50% of it. 50% of our revenue for the general fund comes from the MUA. That's just the bottom dollar of it. 32% comes from taxes, from our sales tax and our use tax, and all of those other cigarette taxes and everything else. And you'll see the smaller areas off to the side there are charges for services. This is, when we're selling cemetery spots, or we're doing adoptions at the dog park or the dog pound, or any of the 100 different things that is on our budget, the line items we all have, and that's what we're expecting to come back. So for our estimated expenditures, we're looking at 1.874 million. And you can see where the department's use of those funds are. The police department is the biggest the biggest user of the general fund at 39%. You'll also notice that the police department is much bigger than it was last year. And the reason for that is because I've combined the animal control, code enforcement, police department, and dispatch all into one single entity, so that they can share resources, so that they can share in the costs of running their departments. And I have full faith in Chief Paxton. We've discussed it, and I think it's the right way to go, and it's the right way to do this. And it's going to save us some money by not having 3 different budgets out there that we have to fund completely. We have now one budget for the police department. And it just that brings us down in how much we have to spend in supplies and office supplies and materials and supplies and O&M cost. So when we look at the general fund expenses by function, what we're looking at here, and I want to kind of get into is this is what we're spending the money on, not by department, but what every department is spending it on. On our personnel costs comes up with 66% of that, which is it's right on par with other entities, and it's right where I expect it to be. O&M is operations and maintenance, and we're sitting at about 5%. I wish that was up, and I kind of want to shoot for a 10% on that, because there are things that we should be doing maintenance wise that we just don't have the funding for. But those are things that we're going to have to work out in the future. Transfers out comes up to about 19%, and those transfers out include a debt payment to from the administration. The general fund borrowed money from the power plant, and we are paying that back at a rate, and we should have had that paid off years ago, but we just haven't been paying it the way we were supposed to, and the way that the original agreement was to pay that back. So that's part of that, and the other part of it goes into the internal service fund, which you've seen in your budget packets that we've moved the administration, those departments that service both the MUA and the general fund, the general government. We've moved them into their own fund, and it's called the General Government Internal Service Fund. The reason for that is because as a city manager, previously my budget came completely from the MUA. Even though I spend less, I spend maybe 40% of my time on the MUA and 60% of my time on the general government. Those funds should be coming equally from those departments, and this is the way we do that. Is we create an internal service fund, and we move all of those departments and all those functions into a department or into a fund that gets paid by both. So here's our estimated revenues and where they're going to be. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but there is an arrow there.
We can.
Okay, good. So license income, we're expecting that to kind of go up a little bit, and from what the estimate was last year, that is what that is. The revenues for sales tax is, yes, it is down, and we hope that by the end of the year we're starting to see that economic growth come back in. So we're hoping that by November those numbers are up and beyond what they were previously. So, and obviously we're still going to continue to do our intergovernmental transfers. There's our fund balance down here on the bottom, the fund balance application of 200,000, and that's what brings us up to that amount. You're also going to see down here the investments in the reserves. These are not calculated in the budget, but I need to show you that we have them. These are our CDs. They're responsibly invested funds that a lot of our different funds have. And we're going to show you at the end of next year what we expect that to be. So, yep. So expenditures, I'm going to go through these really kind of rapidly because not a lot has changed. And especially on the expenditure side, I will say that one of the things that I'm really focused on this year is providing some additional funds for some raises that are much needed. And there's also a benefit that costs us approximately $65 a person. And it gives every one of us, all of the employees, access and membership to Air Evac. And the reason I wanted to kind of look into this and I tracked it down and figured out how to do it I see the amount of times that the helicopter flies over my house and lands at that hospital, and each one of those is 40, 50, 60, $70,000 that those folks now owe to that air ambulance. Through these memberships that cost us $65 per person per year, which we're talking about a grand total of about $2,300 total for the entire benefit. It's worth it. It's worth it to our people. I think our people are worth it, and just having that peace of mind is worth every penny of it. So those are really the only things that I've kind of added on expenditures. So I'm gonna just go through these. If you wanted me to stop, just tell me to stop. So just city administration, we're going to have to change the name of that, and it's going to go to general fund transfers because the city administration was moved to the ISF, the internal service fund. So you'll see here that our personnel and O&M and capital costs are all gone. Those have all been moved over, but we still have these transfers that need to stay. So we're going to have to work on this, and Billy and I will make that happen and create a new department in order to handle these general fund transfers. Court and legal services, no change from last year. Sorry, Corey, I love you, man, but police department, police and fire, I've put these kind of together in twos because just for time's sake. Obviously this number down here is much bigger than what you saw last year, and that's because we've combined 3 of those departments together. So and our fire department hasn't, we're trying really hard to modernize that fire department and get them another body. I want to eventually get a 7th firefighter in there, so that the chief works a 9 to 5 a day time, and he's available to 5 days a week. But that's it. I had it built in until COVID, and now it's gone. So our streets and our parks, we're just reducing costs everywhere we can, and you'll see from 120,000 last year to 108,000 this year. All of those little whittling away at our costs is what's really going to make us get through next year. So the cemetery and the library, and of course our community services. Community services is a lot of what we do for community services is just paying insurance on the buildings. So the MUA, resources for the MUA, we're estimating at 4.8 million. Mangum Electric makes up 61% of that, and the water makes up 14%. The rest is all under 10%. Our costs are estimated at 4.79. And you'll see that the numbers our expenditures are right in line with what the revenues were. Here's our expenses by function. You'll notice a huge difference here when you look at O&M expenditures being the highest thing that we're paying. And the reason for that is because we have to pay our electric bill. So when you consider, you take the electric out, and it's really not going to be that number, but we do have to pay OMPA for providing us the electric that we then sell, but that's why that number is so high. Revenues, broken down how much they are. It's basically the same thing you saw in the pie chart. Water department, we're doing what we can to reduce costs, but when you talk about the utility authority, reducing cost in the utility authority is very hard to do. It's very, very hard to do. So you're not going to see a lot of savings in here. The electric department, we were able to bring it down by about 400,000, while still increasing personnel costs. So sanitation, once again, the cost of our ESI contract, which is waste management, accounts for that big chunk of 347,000. A big chunk of that 347,000 is the ESI payment. So wastewater, we know that you're going to see here, we've done some most of the transfers that we were doing in the past were coming from the electric department. The electric department was paying for everything. They were paying for the golf course. They were paying for the general fund. They were paying for this. They were paying for that. I've split that up so that the electric department isn't paying for everything. All of MUA is paying equally into equally by amount of revenue into these departments to help fund those things. So that's why the big increase from wastewater from last year, 126,000 to 256,000. So. And our power plant expenditures are relatively staying the same. So now we go into our other enterprise funds, the golf fund. And I know that this is one where there's going to be some discussion. So I'm going to take this one in stride. Our revenues we do have a large transfer in. That transfer in does come from the MUA. And the reason for that large transfer in is to get us back to startup for the golf course. We're not going to bring in any revenues for the summer, but we still have to buy all of the vending. We still have to purchase the balls, the hats, anything that we're going to sell. We need to go out and we're going to need to purchase all of that. So that's why you're seeing that is so high. But you'll also notice that it drops off every year, and it continues to drop off as the charges for services continues to rise. And this is where we're hoping to see next year. So I'm moving on from the golf fund. Questions? Bueller? Okay.
You're wanting me to say something.
No, I don't. Okay, the municipal pool fund. Municipal pool was actually a general fund activity, but the municipal pool also does vending, and so they are considered. They're charging admission for getting into the pool. They're charging vending. They're not making any money. I'm just saying that means that this is much like the golf course. It is a enterprise fund. So I've pulled it out of the general fund, and it is actually funded entirely by charges for services and the water department. I figure water department really needs to be involved, and they are the sole funding asset for the municipal pool.
Dave, yeah. On this,
Go ahead.
Because I do know that there's some issues.
Yes.
Down at the pool, specifically the last year, the last 2 weeks, they were losing between 1.5 feet to 2 feet of water daily. So I didn't see where we were looking at trying to repair or at least look into that, because it's a similar budget as it was.
Yes, and the problem is that we don't know what we're going to need to spend on it, and I think that's going to come through a capital improvement fund request mid-summer when we really get time and we've got our inmates back and we can slow down to where we can take a really good hard look at what we need to fix out there, how much it's going to cost us, and we can put that request together. I couldn't budget for a request that we had no idea what it was going to cost.
I just, and the only reason I'm bringing this up now, I mean, we're shut down at this point, and
Yes.
it's a good
It's a
opportunity.
great time. Yes. It's a great time to do those things. Yes, absolutely. You're right. Which is why we really want to push for a midsummer getting all of those things done. I know that the pool needs to be repainted. It needs to be sealed. We actually need to bring a pool company out there to actually go in and seal it properly. We need somebody to go out there and take a look at the water sanitation, sanitization, the chlorinator and all of that to make sure that all of that is running properly. And I know that there's some issues out there,
and with the pool house as well. I mean, there's some safety issues.
There's some
and
major issues in there. And we had set aside about $10,000 last year, but we just never got around to spending it, to going out there and being able to fix it over the winter. We got hammered this winter with all of our water breaks and just one thing after another. So we, unfortunately, and I got to take responsibility for that. We let go of some stuff, and one of those is we didn't fix some of the things at the pool that we needed to fix. And so this is really the only thing that you can look at and see as being a positive of COVID is that it gives us time during this summer to fix this pool, and we seriously need to spend some money on it. I just don't want to budget for it when I don't know how much it's going to cost. And we have funds, and I'll show you where those funds are.
And my only reason for bringing this up, we are subsidizing the golf course.
Yes.
And that's for a majority of the older people and the people that enjoy golf. But
Right.
I'll tell you, my experience with the pool is there's a large number of people, kids.
Oh yeah.
That is their golf.
Yes.
And so we need to be supplementing that as well as the golf course to make sure that our kids have a place to go in the summer. I know they don't have that place this summer, but that's one of the things that I want to express, that I want that an ongoing thing.
Yes. And you'll see throughout the future in 21, we're putting in 33,900, and that's going to go up to 35,900, and then it's going to go up to 37,000. We are increasing the spending at the pool as we go along, and we need to, and we have to. And as capital improvements come up, we need to be pulling those from the right place, and that's the capital improvement funds that we've got set up in order to do those things.
Okay. I just had to say my piece.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
Me too.
This is our airport operations fund. The airport is mildly subsidized. I say mildly. This year, it's a little bit more than what we're hoping for next year. And the reason for that is we're not going to see a lot of revenue coming in due to the pumps, the situation with the pumps. And we're waiting to get those bids in. We have to replace the pump out there, the fuel pump. So that's a capital expense that we've put here at about $10,000. So now we move into the capital improvement funds. These are funds where we can build up money over the years and allow those to build to pay for things down the way. One of those was we started the theater renovation fund in 2018 and 2019. Last year was our first year for it. And we're going to continue to do that because we desperately need something in this town. We need it, for the winters, and we need, we've got golf and we've got the pool in the summer, but there's, what do we have in the winter? What do we have going on that we can keep people occupied throughout the year? So getting that theater at least so it's not falling down. Priority one, we got to keep it from falling apart. Priority 2 is let's get it up and operational. The perpetual care fund is required by law, and it's a state law that we have this whenever we have a cemetery. This is to guarantee funds to care for the cemetery. You'll see that we're not expecting any expenses. We're not planning for any expenses, but we do have funds in the fund balance down here that should something come up, we do have some funds to go in there and fix things. So we also have a CD of about 18,000 in that builds interest on.
Dave, have you
Go ahead.
have any idea or looked at what it's going to cost for the having water available out there at the cemetery?
The irrigation system?
Well, yeah, you know, they used, I don't know how much they had just in irrigation. They just had faucets, and I used to go hook up to the faucet and sprinkle. You know, but now, of course, the pipes are so bad, I know.
Yeah. And in my opinion, the whole thing needs to be put or to be replaced, and we just put heads on it, and we irrigate and we water it so that we don't have the goat heads, and we don't have the sticker bushes, and we don't have the weed problems that we have out there.
Yeah.
Amazingly, if Bermuda grass takes hold, it will kill off every weed that's there. It's just getting enough water there to get the Bermuda grass to grow. So that is one of the things that we really need to look at in the near future is getting that irrigation up and running to help us with keeping those weeds down. So Street and Alley Fund, as you know, the Street and Alley Fund is funded entirely by our gas tax. We rarely ever use the amount of funding that we bring in, and we do that on purpose. We need to have that fund balance build up over time. As we build those funds up, then we can do more than just patch. We can do an overlay. And the only problem is that to do a quarter mile of an overlay costs about $400,000 or $500,000. So you can see we're not building up very much very fast. We're going to have to come up with some other way to fund those kinds of projects, and doing those kinds of projects this year it's just not going to happen. This is a new fund for this year. The MUA has a capital improvement fund, but there was no general fund capital improvement fund. There was no place for the general government to have capital improvements funds dropped into where we could build those funds up, where we could pay for things that need to be done major project wise for the general government. And when I say general government, I'm talking about City Hall, I'm talking about the fire department, I'm talking about the police department, I'm talking about all those things that, you know, isn't covered by the MUA. So we've set some money aside from this year that we did not spend in capital improvements. We're going to drop that into this fund before the end of the month, so that we have that built up for next year. So that's where this 58,000 comes in.
Dave, is this money that we're looking at here for the capital improvements, is that also when we're looking towards what we're going to do as far as your plan of attack for a new City Hall?
Yeah, partially. Yeah, City Hall is going to, depending on what our solution is where we're going to get the funding for that. There's always going out, reaching out and doing municipal funds, municipal bonds, or I don't want to get into those. They're complicated and we have to pay all those back. I don't want to put us into debt. Having some debt is fine. Having too much debt is going to put us in a burdensome place. So yes, this is where we need to start dropping money to do those kinds of things, like moving City Hall. And before, unfortunately, before COVID-19 hit, this fund was going to see $50,000 a year going into it. And that's the kind of effect that COVID had on us, was we went from $50,000 next year to $7,000. So that hurts a lot. This is the MUA Capital Improvement Fund. There's really no difference from last year to this year in what we're spending. We're saving a little bit in our O&M funding or O&M costs, but as far as money coming in, I think there is some additional funds. Every department now is putting in at least 0.5% of their revenues are going into the MUA Capital Improvement Fund. And we want to build that up over time so that 3% of each and every department revenues goes into this fund to pay for major issues that come up, to pay for when, you know, things like the lagoons are going to need some major overhaul and major work. This is where that money needs to come from. And in order to use this, we have to fund it. And that's why we need to build ourselves up to that 3% over the next several years. The Power Plant Capital Improvement Fund, this is actually going to kind of go up a little bit. And the reason is because we're actually paying into it what we're supposed to be paying into it to reimburse what we borrowed many moons ago. So the rest of these, now we're going into the trust and agency funds. Trust and agency funds are those funds that are set up to monitor, you know, like state agencies and federal agencies that are providing us money. We have to have a separate fund set up on the side so that they can monitor that through our audits. So all of these that you see are either those that are set up because of donations or those that are set up in a trust, such as you know, the Riverside Endowment Trust or the Busby Trust. Those will fall into this as well. So these are where we are being monitored for compliance with the reasoning for the funds being there. So that's what these are. Friends of the Park, we're only getting in our interest off of it, and we are not spending any money on it. I don't want to focus on that this year. So the revolving loan fund, previously, before in 2019, the revolving loan fund wasn't making anything. It was in an account that wasn't receiving any interest whatsoever. So we had $107,000 sitting in an account that was not earning interest, that wasn't doing anything. So we've moved that. I contacted the Department of Commerce and found out that yes, we can put this in a interest-bearing account, and we have been doing that. And so really for the next few years, until we start using this again to get some economic development going, our primary source of income for it is going to be that interest payment. The Water Well Improvement Fund, not a big change here again from where we were last year. Mangum Economic Development Fund was set up last year as well, right along with the theater. And this was set up so that we could have funding to do economic development projects. We haven't used it yet. We need to build those funds up in order to use it. and we need to decide how that's going to be properly used. But we needed to set it up, and we needed to start putting money aside to get some economic development going, and that's what this fund is there for. Meter deposit fund is where whenever you come in and you pay your deposit for your utility, those funds have to go into the meter deposit fund. We have to monitor that and keep that separated from our MUA funds. Because if everybody wanted to come in and get their deposit back, we'd have to actually have it. And this is what that does. So Riverside Endowment Fund was a trust that was given to us, a fund to help pay for Riverside. We haven't used this fund in a very long time. There's not a whole lot in it. You'll see on the bottom here that our fund balance total for it is $2,145. We've got 43,000 in CDs for this. Library grant fund. This is the library gets state grants, state aid, and so the state obviously wants us to have a fund that they can monitor and they can watch and they can audit. This is supposed to be money in, money out. And over the years, they've put money in and haven't taken the 100% of the money out. So you're going to see a fund balance there. But when state aid comes in, we need to spend 100% of that. So that's why I've put in there that the miscellaneous revenue that you're going to see up there is really the interest that's earning off of this 10,000. We also are not going to put that state aid in until we actually receive it, because we don't want to make the estimation and be wrong. So it's so easy for us to, and that goes, I'll say that goes for every one of these that we're going to get state aid, and we're going to get the SWOTA aid or the fire department grants or any of that. We are not putting those funds into the budget. We will put them in when we get them, and it's the proper way to do it in my book. It doesn't show that, hey, we know we're going to get these funds, and then all of a sudden the state goes bankrupt and we're not getting it, and now we're spending it because it was there. Well, that's not the right way to do things. So
Dave.
Yeah.
So you'll know, like Mary Jane's donation that she gives to the city,
yeah,
goes into that library donation.
Right.
In the fund.
And we use those as any matching funds.
Right.
So, yeah. But again, any donations that do come in, I'm not going to preload those
right.
without knowing that we actually received them. So, same thing goes for the fire grant fund. Again, this should be a zero balance at the end of the year. Money comes in, money goes out. It should be equal, and it should be the same. And that hadn't been happening in the past, but we're really going to start watching those kinds of things. So also, whenever we receive funding from donations, or this is the same kind of a deal, when we do the mud bog, all of those funds go into this to do our portion or our matching funds to whatever the state aid comes in. So Busby Trust was a large donation. I don't know the entire story behind this. I just know that it was a very large, generous donation that has to be split every other year between the parks and the library. And all we spend on that is the estimated interest earned. So we don't, that way we don't overspend it and we use it all up and it's gone. So Crime Stoppers, this comes from a fee that we put on every court or every ticket. So when you see the the fines and forfeitures coming in, that's our estimated ticket revenue that goes into the Crime Stoppers Fund. And we always estimate that we're going to use 500. We haven't had to use it in, I'd say, years, but it's there, and it has purpose. Airport Grant Fund, this is the AIP that we talked about earlier. This is a 100% funds in, funds out. Because this is a federal grant and a state grant, my top priority is we have this zero balance at the end of the year. We don't want to have any money left over under any circumstances. So fleet management. One of the things that we're doing to save some money this year is we're not putting in the transfers of the departments for the vehicles lease that we do a year that we're supposed to do. It makes up about $200,000 in transfers, 248,000 for last year. You'll see the only thing that we're going to have to continue to do is the golf course, because we have to do something to get those the golf carts replaced. So we are saving ourselves a ton of money this year by not doing those transfers, and you'll see that we're bringing those transfers back next year. And if you saw the rest of this we've got this projected out to 2052, and with this year not doing these transfers, it doesn't hurt us over the long haul. We're still in pretty good shape, so we can still afford to do the expenditures for our planned vehicle replacement without having to have that income come in, because that's the way this fund works, is we're using fund balance on a regular basis to pay for those. So when you see here this negative 79 on the budget balance, that's perfectly okay, because we've got 356,000 in there to purchase those vehicles. So, and then the last fund that we have to talk about tonight is the Internal Service Fund, the General Government Internal Service Fund. This is the fund that I was talking about where earlier, where the city manager, the administration, utility customer service, the city superintendent, he is no longer in MUA. The city superintendent is now in the Internal Service Fund, because he deals not only with what the water department does and what the electric department does, he also is the one that's in charge of making sure that the parks are doing what they're supposed to be doing. He's the one that's making sure that the street department is doing what they're supposed to be doing. So he splits both between the general fund and the MUA. We put him in the Internal Service Fund. He's paid by both. So IT also falls into this category. IT is you'll see a large bump in that, and the reason is because we have put all of our costs for telephones, internet, you know, what we were splitting up amongst every one of our departments and having to go through this convoluted formula to decide how much each department needed to pay in. Well, that doesn't need to happen, because each fund is paying into the Internal Service Fund, and now IT will cut the checks for all of those IT expenses that we have on a monthly basis. Our Microsoft, our Encode, our website, the update to the website that we've budgeted for, the infrastructure update to our systems. All of that has been put into IT and is being paid for by both funds on a quasi equal basis. Vehicle maintenance is the only other one that moved over, and that's because vehicle maintenance works on the police department and they work on the electric department. So it's the same concept. So that's just your summary, and then each one of them are broken down. Here's your personnel expenses and your O&M capital outlay for each one of these departments. This is your administration, and these numbers are going to have to change in IT, shop maintenance, vehicle maintenance, and then the city manager's fund and the city superintendent fund. Do we all have a headache now?
No.
Oh, I really liked looking at this and you pointing to everything.
Good, good. I apologize for it being so long, but I wanted to make sure that because we're not all together, that you are, when you approve this budget, if you approve this budget, you have seen every line item. You all have a copy of this budget. Sent it to you last week. There is no change from what I sent you to what is here. So that is the end of my presentation. If there's any questions, I'm here for it.
I will say, Dave, I do appreciate how it came across to us, because I was able to go through it. The main question I had was via our conversation yesterday in the meeting yesterday. So
yeah,
I know you expected more from me.
I'm glad. My hope is that by being more transparent with how we did it and how I built it, and the explanations that I gave you in the budget to show you why we did all these things, that we would answer those questions through the budget. So
I will ask, so the things that we have in place, or the things that you're wanting to look at with regards to like your projected outcomes for the year, having negotiations with the other cities and things like that with 911 and looking at moving City Hall and stuff like that. What are those, as far as when do we expect that those conversations are going to be had? And
the sooner the better. And the conversation regarding the 911 is not a conversation that I can have. It's not a negotiation that I can do. This is going to be an elected official to elected official kind of a conversation. And the reason for that is because as a city manager, I don't have an equivalent in Granite. They've got a city clerk there, and she does a lot, and Juanita is fantastic, and she's great. But I think that the conversation needs to happen at the elected source. So we've got to set up a meeting where we get each one of those entities, one from each one of those entities, to come to the table and we discuss it, where we get one of the commissioners, county commissioners, one of our commissioners, one of the council members of Granite, the fire district for Hester, what is it? Hester, Jester, Reed, Brinkman, Willow. There's a dozen entities that are out there that we need to bring together to the table, and we need to have those conversations. I can set it up, but I don't think it would be my place to initiate those conversations.
So the $208,000 that was on that cost, is that personnel and only personnel?
That is
cost?
Only for personnel in their benefits.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is.
And then basically we're getting recouped the 4,800, and then that small office space that
in the county jail. Yes, 622 square feet. So And it's something we're going to have to figure out. And I think a part of that conversation is also going to be when we move, if we find a space that we can move all of our personnel into, dispatch is going to come with us. So,
and that was my question. That's still our intent as the
it is our
commission
intent.
to look at that.
And there was conversations that I was having originally where, and there's two ways that we can work this 911 issue. Number one, we hand over the dispatch function to the 911 authority, and they are the ones that are going to have to negotiate those contracts. And if we were to pay $89,000 a year, we're still saving ourselves $110,000 a year. And that's being generous of what the city should be paying for 911 services to a contract. So you could do that. You could, or we just take it over and the way we're talking about now and doing the negotiating to have the different entities at least do something to supplement us.
What would be the additional cost for us on top of the personnel in order to incorporate the 911 if we were to take that over?
Well, there's two. We're talking about two different things here. When I say that we're taking over 911, I don't want to take over 911. I don't want to basically put the 911 authority out of business. That would be an incredible cost for us. It was talked about. I had thought about it, but I do like the concept that the 911 authority comes from the entire county, that it's not us dictating to the county what everything is going to be done. The authority gets enough money in to pay for the 911 equipment and charges that they are the services that they're charged for, internet and their IT and all of that. The funds that they get in from the telecommunications companies actually is pretty much balancing them out. So I don't think that there's anything that the 911 authority has done wrong. I think we've just accepted the responsibility openly and said, oh yeah, we'll just take care of it. The city of Mangum, they got all the money. We're going to take care of it. We can't continue to just survive that way. That's what this is about.
How do the other counties fund it?
Through exactly what I'm talking about. They negotiate a deal with those agencies. And we went through this when I was in Crescent. We went through it. We had our own dispatch, and we decided to hand our dispatch over to the county. Actually, we gave it to Guthrie, and Guthrie took it over. And we then turned around and we paid them $35,000 a year. And that saved the city, gosh, I want to say it was about $180,000 a year. So it saves us a ton of money.
Initiated between the mayors.
I think it should be.
Hey, I spoke up first.
You
Had your chance.
I think that's where it starts, and then to say, because if I go in there as a non-elected official, I have no stance. I have no. There's no meat behind what I have to say. Versus if a mayor goes to a mayor, then or a council member goes to a council member, that conversation can happen in a legislative format.
Does anybody know when all that started, when the city took it over? Has it always been that way? Back when, I know there was a deal when SWOTA was, has it always been this way? Where Mangum, the city, was paying for all of this? Did the county ever?
We were at one time getting the 911 money, and then they took it over. The 911 board took it over. That was right about the time I started working for the city.
Okay, so as far as you know, the city's been controlling it or taking care of it.
Right.
So I don't know what the history is. I
Well,
have to ask Louise Price.
and my thought is why do we take on the burden? Why not us? Why don't us pay the fee of the 89,000, 90,000 and let them take on the burden? I'm better. That way we take out the negotiation we have with the other entities.
Mhm.
We don't need to negotiate that and hope that we're going to come up with some type of agreement. That could be the 911 board, not us.
Right.
We pay our fair share, whatever that's determined to be. I mean, that's my thought process in this is why should we take on the negotiation responsibility when we're not really the entity to make those decisions?
But if I don't know if I'm correct in this, but if we were to say we're no longer going to be responsible for it, we want to pay for it, somebody has to then take it over. And there's nobody. Is that correct? That it would be shut down for a period of time.
Well, the 911, I mean, that's what the 911 commission or whatever it's called, authority, that's their responsibility. They're getting payments for that. I mean, I get that we took on the responsibility, but they have an obligation to the citizens of Greer County to provide that service as a part of that authority. I mean, we went into, I don't even know, we're not in any kind of contract, are we?
No.
It's just, is it just a handshake agreement? What is it that we continue to do this?
There's, to my knowledge, there is no contract. It's a handshake deal. It's something that we've always done. And
Well,
because we've always done it that way,
I think that needs to change.
I agree.
But
But I'm going to make a lot of enemies doing it.
Well, but here's the thing. The city of Mangum can't take on the full responsibility in the entire Greer County. We can't be the person that we have to put the weight of Greer County on our shoulders. The county's receiving property taxes. They're receiving things that they can utilize for these things. And we shouldn't, because, and don't get me wrong, I understand we need the service, but we shouldn't be the person that is bearing all the responsibility here.
Right.
And we should
understand there's a difference. We call it the Greer County 911 Authority. That actually has nothing to do with Greer County. It's a separate trust entity, and it has nothing to do with the county itself.
No, I'm just saying, but we shouldn't put the brunt of the entire Greer County on us. Just because
Right.
we have funding coming in doesn't mean that we should have the funding going out.
We don't have the funding coming in anymore. I mean,
Well,
that's
that's
just,
what I'm saying.
that's just the problem.
We need to fix our streets and our sewer
Mhm.
system and our
Exactly.
water lines.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we got,
can the mayor just give notice to the surrounding communities that we're giving like a 90-day notice that this is either going to change or we're no longer going to be responsible for the 208,000 per year?
I would want to just start some general conversation first and go from there. And
Yeah, you don't want to make it confrontational, and I don't want to make this confrontational. I wish we didn't have to do it.
well, the bottom line is
But we do.
nobody's going to want to pay anything.
Nobody is.
Nobody's going to want to come up with the money. And
Right.
the county, and it may be one of those deals where the county has to we have to do something else on our property tax or something. I don't know what the answer is. I mean,
Well, your other cities are in the same position we're in. I mean,
Well,
except they're
when you
not
go-
paying it.
You look at where everybody that's surrounding us, Beckham County, they run their own 911, and Jackson County, they've got two separate 911s. They've got a county 911 that operates for everybody else besides Altus, so there's and all of those are being worked through SWOTA. We're the only ones that are not on the SWOTA 911. That's not a decision that the city can have any part of, any decision on.
But if we're paying 208,000, we should.
We pay 208,000 for personnel.
okay. And this is a long conversation and one that we're going to be talking about real soon, hopefully throughout the rest of the year. So
Right.
Anybody else have any questions or comments or anything that you'd like to say? Do we have any guests?
No,
No guests?
Ron Gay is down there. He's being quiet.
Okay. Okay, if there's not any more comments or questions or anything, can I just call this public meeting, public hearing closed? Can I?
That's
Okay,
it.
so at this time, unless there's no more questions, I declare this public meeting, this public hearing closed. Thank you all very much for participating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.